We will bring this meeting of Grants Pass School District number 7 to order. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like to point out that we are all representing good examples wearing our masks, but we are also properly social distanced with few enough people in the room that it's not required that we wear our masks. And at this point, I'm going to remove mine so that we can speak better and the microphone pick us up. Superintendent Cole, do we have any additional written communication?
No additional written communication.
Todd, have we received any emails or chat requests for wishing to speak to an agenda item?
You're muted.
Nothing in the chat room at this time.
Thank you. And for the record, if anyone from the public who joins later wants to, wants to speak to an agenda item, if they do something like that, let us know and we can at the proper time. I guess I don't have to do the blue card thing, huh?
No, we don't.
Okay, at this time I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Recommend that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? This time, Secretary Clark, would you please take a roll call vote?
Member Wilkins. Here. Member Nelson.
Yes.
Member Brownell. Yes. Member Richardson.
Yes.
Member Coleman.
Yes.
Member DeLaGrange.
Yes.
Member Durbin. Yes.
Okay. This time we will start our school board organization for the 2021 school year. And the floor will be open for nominations for chairman of board or chair. According to our policy.
Okay.
Cassie.
I would like to nominate Gary as a repeat.
Is there any additional nomination?
Like additional people for the position, or to
Correct.
nomination doesn't follow making a motion?
Nomination just requires somebody to nominate.
Nominate and second.
No second required.
The little form has a blank for second.
Yeah, we've always been a second on it.
I know, we did look that up. Parliamentarian.
Yes. Unless it's stated in our bylaws.
Isn't it normally for in Robert's Rules of Order? I have to second.
No, it's one of the actual things that are misnomers. It's known that a nomination doesn't follow the same motion.
And you're looking at what?
Well, I just printed this off, but this was Bradley, the first foremost four things most people don't know about nominations. And number one is nominations don't need a second. And talks about, there's nothing objectively wrong with this practice, of course. Just know that Robert's rules do not require it.
Okay, thank you.
That's for a second,
Yes, just for nominations.
so it's not poll for nomination.
So we have one nomination on the floor. Is there any other nomination that is on the floor? That's where we're at right now. Correct?
I would nominate Scott.
I'll second the motion.
Any further nominations? Okay, with that,
So do the nominated folks need to accept the nomination for clarification?
I just verbally accept, and if they
Is it a
deny,
process piece?
they can say, no.
as a practical matter, since they're easy to serve, it's not much point.
I feel like I need clarity on what the process is gonna be from this point forward, as I'm not familiar. It sounds like we have a mixed bag a little bit on what the process should be on nominations and acceptance. So after nominations, which we just did, what are the next steps? I feel a little bit like if you're in headlights.
We have 2 nominations. At that point, we just have an election vote after discussion.
That helps.
And at this point, I think it would be appropriate if I would certainly be willing.
I would be willing to do it. I'm also happy to. Just as I've been approached by a few people to serve. I've given that same statement. I think Barry has done a fine job. I've understood that the tradition has been that the chair only serves for 1 year. Isn't that right?
That's right. For the last 25 years, maybe.
So I don't know what the proper procedure is for. Happy to serve if I was voted, but I'm certainly not seeking immediate type of vote.
Procedure?
So if there's any discussion, I mean, for my part, this last year, it had been more than a decade since I had served as chair and actually skipped a term in there somewhere. And it was a rather odd year. We had the ALJ thing, the senior prank thing, the lawsuit thing, and the COVID thing. Never really got to get to the part about the board, strategic goals and how to improve. Pretty much spent the whole year in neutral in that regard because of all those items, and so I kind of like to finish that part of it. At this point, if there is no further discussions, we just take a vote. And it will be the majority vote for whichever is shared.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
No.
So, similar to, I mean, I think there's a difference between someone seeking the nomination and somebody willing if, elected to it. And part of the reason I know traditionally vice chair has kind of stepped up to be the role of chair, and I had some concerns although you say that you're willing to accept the nominations, any concerns on accepting the nomination and doing that, or I guess I just want to make sure before, if I'm, voting one way or another, that that this is something that you want and feel like you have the time to do. Not that I don't think so, but I just don't want to make that assumption, because I do think this is an important year for our district to stay on task and on point and progress.
You can always find time for the things that are important for you to do. So, I mean, if I were to serve as chair, I would have to find the time. I would find the time. But again, I'd like the board to be unanimous in what we do. Happy to serve. I see this year coming forward as not a year that I had visions of what this year should be and what we wanted to accomplish, and it was, as Gary rightfully pointed out, trampled upon by lots of different issues that came up. I don't see this next year coming a year that I would be able to fulfill a vision that I had, even with, because I think it's going to be a very difficult year for our school district, just with all of the things that are down over the next several months. Will not be normal. Spending all of our time trying to put out fires and creating something for the future is going to be rather difficult. And I think from Kirk's point of view, he's going to need a good board to work with him and be flexible. And I think we have that, whether or not I serve as chair. At least I hope that he feels that way. But really, it's just going to be a very unique year. But in regards to your question, I'm happy to serve. I would find it. Happy to support whoever is.
Any further discussion? Secretary Clark, you call for a vote.
And voting on one or the other.
They would either indicate Scott or Gary.
Can I abstain? Do I have to vote?
We still have a majority. Member Wilkins.
Gary.
Member Brownell. Scott. Member Richardson.
I'll abstain too.
Member Pullman.
Scott.
Member DeLaGrange.
Gary.
Member Durgan.
Scott.
That. Put on my mask so I don't violate. Yeah.
I guess. I'd like to say something.
Here.
Maybe when we get through the entirety of the annual organizational piece.
Well, whatever you say, it's just, we have others to elect too, right? Two more.
Yeah, and that's where I was wanting to want to get through that.
Well, can we nominate? Yeah. The other two positions?
Ask the chair.
Well, we are now on to the next segment
Well, you're the
of our
chair.
agenda.
Your chair was down. Yep.
I think that's quite fair. I think the old chair should finish out the meeting.
That's not the way we've done tradition.
All right, so we are now on to the election of a board vice chair.
Well, I would like to, Casey. He'd be continuing.
Okay, so we have a nomination for vice chair and Casey. Any other nominations? And you got Johnny Mulgrew.
Maybe. Not right now.
Hearing no further nominations, then we'll call for a roll call vote.
Member Wilkins?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes?
Member Brownell?
Yes.
Member Richardson?
Yes.
Member Coleman?
Yes.
Member DeLaGrange?
Yes.
And Member Durbin?
Abstain.
All right, welcome, vice chair.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Glad to be here.
Next item then is the election of our board parliamentarian. Cassie is currently serving in that role. We have a nomination.
I would nominate Patsy to serve again.
Further nominations? Let's have a roll call vote.
Member Wilkins? Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Brownell?
Yes.
Member Richardson?
Yes.
Member Coleman?
Yes.
Member DeLaGrange?
Yes.
Member Durbin?
Yes.
And congratulations.
Clarification, you may ask to be removed from the nomination.
All right, so designation of meeting times, dates, and places. I believe our next meeting will be held 28th.
This is dedicating on the calendar for the year, the school board meetings, standard times.
An appropriate time for Cliff to make his
Well, I just want to share that I feel pretty close to Gary Richardson. To me, that doesn't matter. I went through what I thought would be my second year as chair, second year in a row as chair. I was going through that in my mind. I had it all planned out. And a board member walked into the meeting and said, I'm going to nominate somebody else. And I was crestfallen. I was absolutely crestfallen. I thought, what did I do wrong? Because at that time, they were doing 2 years in a row. And it took me a while to get over it. When I got over it was when I had a heart-to-heart with Rich Ward, if you remember Rich Ward. One of the most understanding individuals I've ever known. And he said, you know, with all the quality we have here on our board, and we talked about it that time, and we have it today, and we've had it ever since, in between, if we can't share the chair annually, rotate, we're not using our heads or something. He didn't use that comment, but that's what I got out of it. And we did from then on until this year. And I think because of this year, the circumstances that we've been through with various school questions about school, well, that's right, we're in charge of school. I mean, we're kind of waking up to a new set that requires a new game plan. And we're no different from mandating. Pro football team, pro basketball, whatever, they're trying to figure out who they are. Just identity, they're looking for identity. And I think this year, we're kind of looking for identity. And I think it's a year that we can rally around a new chair as being something new and different. And it's a healthy check, talking to a doctor here, on your well-being and your progress by changing chairs each year. I just have believed that, and I will always believe that. And the other thing I will always believe is that Gary Richardson is a gentleman that I always want to call my friend, because he's never failed to answer any question that I ever ask him. He always gives me an answer. straight from his heart, I know. That is something I will not forget.
Regarding a motion on our meeting times, currently they're 5 o'clock on the second Tuesday and noon on the fourth Tuesday of the month. Move
Motion and a second.
The I would propose to move 5 o'clock also. And vote for meeting on Tuesday.
Seems like traditionally we've had that noon meeting so that we could have a report from the student body officers. With the uncertainty of this year. Any thoughts on that?
We'll talk a little bit more about that in the executive session. At some point, they will be back and available. We will continue to run our leadership program. It might be great. And we could also ask some to attend the 5 o'clock meeting. That's not box either. So how students are responding under these current circumstances, they might be able to represent high school. There are some benefits to that piece. So, yeah. Go either way. It's really the preference of this board to conduct your meetings and your availability and those things. Some folks have different obligations that really it comes to your time to do a new meeting. So I know I like having a new meeting, so my team, it's one less evening that they have to give up during the month. That's always been something I've heard the board comment on. But I can go either way, but it's so this board can fulfill its duties and obligations that you come to an agreement on what.
Easier for me to make 5 o'clock meetings, but I do definitely see the benefit of having a new meeting for a couple of those reasons. I think it just depends on, like you said, the majority of the board makeup now, and if the new meetings will make it more difficult for us to be a full board throughout the year, or is the advent of basically the Zoom version of these meetings make it easier to pop into a new meeting, even if it doesn't work, but you don't have to come all the way down here? I don't know. I mean, I'm open to both, but I think it depends on kind of what the majority of us have going on schedule-wise and what we anticipate for the next year. But I don't want to discount the value of, giving summer leave to directors being here, not after, an extra evening each month and for student participation or parent. I mean, there's also parents sometimes that come to those things, and I know trying to make the news would be difficult, so.
And we're still open to talking. I don't care either way either. I do know that I've had staff mention that noon is hard for them. There may be something I'll be not taking personal, but again.
It just seemed like we've had trying to get traction, revamping how the board can do it, whatever. Only really having one solid meeting a month is making that difficult. So to see part of this year, I mean, we have to stay there looking for that.
I would be supportive of both at that, yeah.
We've had a motion for 12 and 5. And
that we amend the motion to make the second meeting at 5.
Or I could withdraw the motion and the second could withdraw, and we have a new motion. I will withdraw my motion, while the second withdraw your second.
The second withdraws my second.
We have a motion to have meetings at 5 o'clock.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? Okay. Levi, would you take a roll call vote then?
Member Wilkins?
In the middle, not scared.
Yes.
Member Nelson.
Right.
Yes.
Member Brownell.
Yes.
Member Richardson.
Yes.
Member Coleman.
Yes.
Member De La Grange.
Yes.
Member Durbin.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. We will have all of our meetings at 5 o'clock. So,
At least it's consistent, but I'm going, wait, which Tuesday is it?
Into a 5 o'clock meeting that was held at noon.
Yeah, I've done that as well. Good thing you don't come, yeah. Probably not go every Friday, every Tuesday, Friday.
So the next item on the agenda then is approval of annual board organizational resolutions for 2021. Kurt, you want to fill me in on that?
Sure. I think in the past we have not read the entire thing in the record. It was only the resolutions and then referencing the left-hand column that was read into the record as presented. So you would read the topic as, all of these on the left-hand column as presented to the board, because it's documents available to the public if they want to dive deep into that.
So I move that we approve resolution 4.3.1 through 4.3.20 as presented.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I have a question. Is Sherry available?
Yep, she should be out there. Sherry, you want to unmute yourself? I think Gary has a question.
I'm here.
Having a hard time hearing us. I'm getting text messages from them, so we need to talk louder, I think.
Can we get a new microphone?
So Sherry,
Not in the budget.
the district auditor, this is my perennial question that somewhere in my past I learned it was a bad idea to use the same auditor for decades. Are we doing due diligence to make sure that we have a proper handle on getting a good auditor?
Yes, I believe we are. The audit firm that we use it used to be Michael Peel's CPA, and now it's KDP. And some of the staff from Michael Peel's are part of the KDP staff, but we do have a different crew that audits us every year. And so I feel like that we are getting a fair audit and a full audit by the team that they send us each year.
Okay. If I remember right, I ran across these kind of auditors are difficult to find, as I understand. But I did run across one that was up in the Portland area. Were you ever able to check into that?
Which one was it, Gary?
I'm not going to remember. Some email I sent. Okay.
I probably did not. I would have to go back and check. So I apologize for that, but I probably did not check into that.
Okay.
And if we were going to change auditors, I'd have to go out for an RFP, and I know for sure I have not done that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And I'll speak just momentarily from the CPA point of view.
it's the CPA's responsibility to also ensure independence for those same reasons from their side. Otherwise, they're running afoul of their ethics and standards that CPAs have to follow. So if they're agreeing to do the audit, there is at least some form of whatever level of assurance that you want that they're following the rules that they're supposed to be following to make sure they're maintaining their independence when conducting those audits as well. That's a pretty big pillar of the CPA profession.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Levi, would you take a roll call vote then?
Member Wilson? Yes. Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Brownell?
Yes.
Member Richardson?
Yes.
Member Coleman?
Yes.
Member De La Grange?
Yes.
Member Durbin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Staff reports. Kirk, who's up first?
Yep, so we're going to talk a little bit about learning management system. As you all know, we were thrown into school shutdowns. We had to go digital, and everybody had to learn Google Classroom real quickly because that's all we had. And that was tough for teachers, for students, for parents to navigate and track all of the things because there were so many places you had to go to click around. So I'm going to have Dr. Bloomquist talk a little bit about our new learning management system, which we are purchasing, and what the benefits of a true learning management system is. Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Okay, sounds good. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yay. So I shared with you a report just kind of summing up the process of a learning management system, making sure you all were kind of in the loop on where we were needing to go for this fall. I won't go into a lot of detail because you already have that in the report, but it was a phenomenal process to work with 43 different teachers representing K-12, CTE, music, special education, English learners, the whole gamut. And what a phenomenal group of people to work with. They dug in, looked at different learning management systems, two in particular that stood out. One is the one that the state of Oregon's already adopted, Canvas. And then our student information system, PowerSchool, has their own learning management system as well. So that's called Schoology. And so we looked at those and then compared those to Google Classroom, which could be considered a learning management system. It's missing pieces to make it a full-blown one, but it does have many of the components. And that's what our staff used this last spring to flip into distance learning for families. So we went through a process. It was really clear. We had a 90% vote for Canvas to be that platform. The beauty of a learning management system is that it takes all the bits and pieces of all the digital components and puts them into one consistent space. And we tried to listen really intently to what our students were saying and our parents were saying from this last spring. And some of you in this room experienced some pretty intense communication from a lot of different people and a lot of different ways that classrooms were structured. And what this tool allows us to do is to combine everything into that one platform, consistent look across the grade levels, across the district, and then really start elaborating on the instructional process to really engage kids in learning in a different way. We are really uncertain about how the fall is going to go. There's lots of people talking about it. There's people being very positional about it. One thing we do know, and I just want to scroll down to this graphic here, is that the very big part of the circle, the virtual learning, we know we have to do that. At some point, we're going to be asked to do that, whether that's the governor saying you're all quarantined for a period of time or a school is quarantined because of an outbreak, whatever that is. We know that our staff are going to have to be flexible to move backwards and forwards. So the base is really that virtual platform. Everybody will build their lessons basically in this platform. And then, and by the way, it integrates beautifully with all the Google stuff that people have already been learning for the last several years. So if somebody wants to use a lot of their Google Classroom stuff, they literally can just put it right into this platform. It's pretty easy to do that. Works really well with Google. And then we have this idea of, you know, if we are partial days or the hybrid schedule, which we've shared out, which is probably what our secondary folks would have to do given the limitations the state has required of us. That allows everybody to have that consistent platform, whether they're in school or they're at home learning. and then also for in-person. So you can literally have all of those handouts that you normally have stacked up someplace else. They can all be those digital handouts, the links to all the videos, or the interactive lessons from a publisher. All those kinds of things can still all be in that one place. And one of the things we love about this is that it allows anybody to just stay up to date with what's going on in the classroom. So, you know, when your kiddo was sick and they're home for several days, just in normal world, pre-COVID, COVID-19, I guess, getting back up to speed again might be a little complicated. Where are those handouts that we did on Tuesday? It's now, you know, Monday of the next week. And so all that stuff is still listed out there for them. You know, we've adjusted our calendar to kind of front load the year to provide more time for our staff to learn this platform and learn how to take all the materials and things that they have and then put them into their learning environment. And so, and I've been working really hard this week with our vendor to start learning how to do this. We'll have a number of teachers, probably far over 20, representing all different levels throughout the district, actually working this summer to build out their classrooms, to see how that works, and then to be those coaches for their colleagues as they come back in the fall. And so we're pretty excited about that. But that in a nutshell kind of gives you the sense of what this is. Are there questions about an LMS or any concerns or thoughts that you have about that? And I have a separate report there you should have a copy of based on some questions that came in. I'll address that in just a second, but I just want to focus on the LMS for a minute here. Are there questions about it?
I'll just make a comment. I am pleased at the collaboration, and I realize a committee that size is a bit large to deal with, but I appreciate going through that process and getting that input, making it easier to spread the word to everyone. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet. It was really interesting to do over Zoom. I will say one thing that we learned in this process, that since we recorded all of those meetings and sessions with the different vendors, even if a teacher couldn't make that meeting, they could always go get the recording, and they were always up to date with everything that was going on. So they had a lot of chances to stay up to date with any of those trainings, even if they couldn't do it at that specific time. So there's that synchronous learning where we're all online, like us doing it right now, and there's asynchronous where you can pick it up a little bit later on. So that was another good example of how a learning management system would help you out.
Thank you.
So this is Scott. As we enter into this virtual learning process, do we anticipate that we will have synchronous classrooms going on in junior high and high school, where the kids will be required to log in at a certain time as if they were in class, or is it all going to be asynchronous, or how do we anticipate this looking?
You know, that's maybe a better question for Trish and Susan, but the platform allows for both of those to happen. My feeling in talking with parents and getting feedback on our surveys, you know, we had a lot of people, and maybe some kids from parents in this room, who kind of slipped into the staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and, you know, sleeping in till noon. And I would want us to promote keeping a regular schedule, so that if you're at home today, you still can log in and do this. That will be slightly different than somebody who chooses a fully online environment. And so this platform, by the way, we have to allow that opportunity for families that want that. And this Canvas learning management system allows for us to have a full-time online program as well. And we are in the process of building out a full-blown online avenue for families who desire that. So I don't know if Tricia or Susan have any comments on that synchronous or asynchronous learning.
I'll jump in. The guidance from the Oregon Department of Education has a lot of requirements around it related to distance learning, including the requirement that daily synchronous interactions need to occur with students. Two-way communication, not just, I saw that they logged in, but there needs to be scheduled time with kids, face-to-face, virtually, in whatever our online presence looks like.
And Trish, for clarification, that's for the fully online program, that is the requirement, or is it also a requirement for the hybrid model? I did not think that the synchronous was required with the hybrid.
Well, the synchronous will be when they come to meet with the teacher in the classroom. To get the amount of content that we're going to need to get in, there will need to be some time asynchronously on the off days. And so teachers will be looking and basically planning for full online instruction. And then when you get to see your kids face to face, it's like a bonus. So we're at secondary, we're really talking about planning from as if everything was distance, and then anything that we can do in a hybrid approach. Short-term distance learning, if we have to shut down quickly, will also require synchronous daily interaction with staff.
And so this is Susan Zatola. On the elementary front, it's a little bit different because we're looking at either fully online or fully in person. So we're currently have not spent any time talking about a hybrid. So if we're in person, obviously they're in person, but if we had those kiddos, I have to be gone just for 2 weeks. We have talked a lot about synchronous versus asynchronous, and it's on the surface it seems like, oh, that's just easy. Well, or not easy, but easier, and we'll get cameras in all the rooms and we'll do that. But we quickly ruled that out, at least temporarily. There are so many FERPA issues that we would need to consider if you have a whole class being filmed and then out there for people to see. We also have considerations for staff who might not feel comfortable with that and not knowing who's viewing them at any given time. But primarily our concern for our youngest kids is that anything online will require for our youngest kids, parents or adults there to help them do that. So if reading's at 8 and math's at 9, for our young kids, who many of them will be in daycare situations, that's not a possibility. And so then they would be having to watch videos of their teachers, kind of replicating all those hours in school while after they get home. It's just too many hours, it's too much screen time. So anyway, there's complicating factors that made us kind of shy away from that, at least for now. We all know everything changes often and rapidly.
Thank you both. Other questions about a learning management system or our next steps?
This is Member Richardson. How many minutes per day are a typical school day for kids in class?
So Trish or Susan, but I think we're around 6 hours is something like that.
I mean, last year's class was 8 to 2:15.
The reason I ask is in my mind, I was just thinking about some of our secondary classes. If they go virtual and we want interaction between the teacher and the student, some of those teachers have hundreds of student contacts per day. I mean, they would have 3.6 minutes of FaceTime per student per day.
That's the good was one-to-one. If you're just doing them one-on-one versus doing it in groups of 10 or 30,
In synchronous, it's not the requirement isn't for an individual. You can do group synchronous instruction where you have your whole class. The way that our current model for the hybrid is looking with 4 periods a day for high school, students taking less classes. It actually, teacher load the maximum teacher load is actually looking a little bit differently in terms of how that works out. When we get closer to an actual plan with, like our start and end time at secondary has not been established. We're still trying to work out some of the details, and so don't have necessarily the start time will not be, for example, 7:50 at the high school. It will probably be later. And that's a function of needing time to get our screening protocols in place. The way that we're going to do lunch is going to be different, much different. And so all of those details are still a work in motion and dependent on some other decisions being made.
This is Member Richardson again. So my wife teaches and had to help some of her students with a video conference, and I'm just struggling with the whole, if the students are remote, how our teachers are possibly going to have the time to do the instruction that she was actually doing per student. Trying to wrap my head around that. So I'm sure you guys have more on that.
We'll have more for you every meeting.
Yeah, we're learning a little bit every week, and we're wrapping our heads around it as well. And we've got amazing people. They're super talented, but this is going to be hard. This is going to be complicated. We can do it, but it's going to be complicated.
That's going to change 10 times between now and when we get there. So I think you keep up the good work. Thank you for the update, and good luck with the next round of changes.
Good luck.
Any other questions on the LMS for us? Awesome. Let me direct you to the other document that I created for you, given some questions about connectivity. Connectivity has always been a big issue for us. So I was able to dig in and find a little more data for you. So I won't read this for you all right now, and I'll let you kind of do it. But just to sum it up, you know, we've worked really hard to figure out how many of our families don't have access to the internet. And so the irony of that question is usually it's a digital survey that we're asking them to tell us. What we're doing differently this fall, is knowing that we can't get them to respond because they don't have access, is that we're asking a question on our registration packet so that when everybody who's registering to come to Grants Pass schools this next year, they're telling us whether they have access or not. And then we'll be able to look by address where those groups of people are. We've got some ideas for that. One of the advantages of this LMS that we learned in this process is that it has the capacity on our Chromebooks to download the lessons, say even for a week, and when you are connected, and it puts anything that's relevant to that lesson, whether it's handouts, videos, interactive things, whatever those are from that teacher's lesson, it will host them on the Chromebook so that a student could go home and work through those lessons, can respond to everything, submit them, and then when that Chromebook is reconnected, it will synchronize back up to the LMS cloud so that all those handouts can be turned in and those kinds of things. So one of the, we're thinking probably we have between 14–16% of our student population, their families probably don't have access to the internet at some level. I've mentioned our homeless numbers, about 520 kiddos this past year who were experiencing homelessness. They're reliant on whether they're living with another family, whether it's relatives or just friends. That's about 75% of our homeless children are living with other people. They're relying on whether that family has access to the internet to see if they have any either. So that's a big question. So regardless, in this new learning platform, kids can have their content stored there on their local Chromebook, and then when it comes back into connectivity, they can synchronize that. Worked really hard with some of our local internet service providers to see if we can get breaks, but it's still really cost prohibitive, as I mentioned in the report, to do that because it's about $40 a line per month. One thing that actually just came up this week that I didn't get a chance to put in this particular report is another device that we're looking into that can put a broadband connectivity out to about 10 acres. So about 1,000 feet in either direction of the device. And it links to, it's actually our network. So it's we're plugged into this device. It actually could be put on a bus. It's one of the devices that are used for buses to do broadband in communities. But we would have these either put on a pole or on one of our buildings. We could kind of point them into the areas where families, where there's a congregation of families that don't have access. We have those. We know where some of those clusters are in some of our trailer parks. And so we could give them access to our actual school internet with their student logins. It's got all the securities that are baked in that make our system pretty robust. That's another solution we're looking at. Those aren't terribly expensive, we found out. They're about $5,000 per device. And so we're looking at where we might be able to place those throughout the community to get access to those families that don't have access to the internet. So that's another solution there. The other parts of the report just give you some data about our students' connectivity and the resources that we have to get them. It gives you a little bit of information about our backbone and how robust our current system is, which is really amazing. It gives lots of access to kids when they have connectivity, whether it's wireless or plugged in straight. But you can see the shift when we go back to home and who does or who does not have access. So trying to meet those needs, working with AT&T currently, they're trying to get aligned on some goodwill folks that are out there that are willing to write checks to districts to basically cover these costs. But we're not sure if that's the pathway for the future as much as maybe putting these broadband signal boosters out there. So just wanted to give a little extra information about that and also to answer any questions or concerns you might have about connectivity for students and families.
This is Member Richardson again. I'm really glad to hear that because I really have a concern about how the pandemic is going to affect the students the ones that are most at risk are probably the ones that don't have that internet connectivity. And I mean, the students that my wife works with the video are generally the ones that are struggling. So it's like a perfect storm for those students to just fall further and further behind. So my position on the board, I'm going to be really advocating that the district do all it can to make sure that there can be interactive access to every student in the district.
Agreed. And I think we've seen the divide, the has and have nots got significantly greater during the pandemic, and it will continue to do that as the COVID virus persists in our communities. Any other questions?
Thanks, Todd.
Okay.
All right. The next item on our agenda is 2021 Superintendent Overview.
Sure. So what I did, doing a lot of reflection on evaluation. When we evaluate students, we evaluate them on standards for learning. When we evaluate teachers, we evaluate them on nationally recognized standards, and felt probably appropriate if you're going to evaluate superintendent based that upon nationally recognized standards for superintendent. So these are directly out of the playbook from OSBA. These are the standard areas, and I used a lot of OSBA resources. These are the goals to achieve, and then put suggested measures or evidence, and then frequency of review. And so working with the board, this is in draft form. You've had it to review, but I wanted you to understand the process by which I got there and going back to standards for evaluating the superintendent. And I think, as you can note, for superintendent, there's not a lot of quantitative, just like teacher evaluation, there's not a lot of quantitative. The students, we can give them a test and they can get 80% correct. And so that tells you they're probably hitting about 80% of the standards. But you know, get some rationale or explanation behind that. See what kind of questions you have.
I know a number of years ago, this is Member Brownell, I know a number of years ago, the board asked the previous superintendent to make available to the secretary kind of the superintendent's calendar so that we could see all of the different meetings that the superintendent attends. We hear reports about the superintendent's meetings, but, especially this time, or this year, we've had numerous phone Zoom meetings with ODE. We've had we have a
Chamber of
principal
Commerce,
meeting. You have
Chamber of Commerce, Road Workforce Partnership, and there's a variety of
we have a lot of
meetings.
meetings that we usually don't hear about. And so I don't know if there's some way to put that online somehow.
I think it could be, and Levi, I think we take note of this, just a good communication tool. I think early on in my superintendency, I offered the board to just at board meetings, do kind of a review of my calendar and my activities, just to demonstrate that. And there didn't seem to be an appetite for that at the time, but and I found it very relevant to keep you informed of what I was doing at that time. And there wasn't an appetite. And this is at least two and a half years ago. So, at least 2.5 years ago. So, I would, to demonstrate the evidence of how I'm spending my time and working on achieving these things, I would find a mechanism to do that.
So just throwing that out there to the board, is that something that would be helpful or not?
Couldn't hurt.
I guess that can be given. I'm not one for micromanagement. I think, I hope we can trust the superintendent to be doing all those things he needs to be doing. But if people would like to see that, I don't know. But would you have an objection?
I wouldn't have any objections to that.
I think that could be a request made by a board member. If wanted.
Let Levi and I know. And we regularly updated on that information.
As we talk about the review of these things, I'm just looking, how will we report some of these? Are we going to go over all of these goals quarterly? I guess I'm just looking at various goals and how would we like to communicate this back to the board? These aren't necessarily metrics that we follow.
They're not. It would have to be. It could be a quarterly. Here's how we facilitate involving the diverse stakeholders in the development of our continuous improvement plan. Here's the process, and so that when we submit that next board meeting or whatever that quarterly is, here's how we arrived at this document. And so it's really more of evidence that these things are happening. How do I make a report on, make ethical and legal recommendations to the board? I have recommendations are on the board agenda and through conversations here. I'm not sure how to report on that other than you guys keep eyes on it every month. Some are challenging. Some can be surveyed when it comes to climate and district culture.
I think what we talked about, we kind of asked you to put this together, and thank you for doing that. I think this resonates on a number of things for me that I'm excited to get more knowledgeable on what we're doing as a district to improve in those areas. Sorry, my glasses keep fogging on, and I can't do them at the same time. I think our responsibility for trying to do a better job as a board for the 360 survey and taking into consideration what components of these goals make sense to get some of that feedback that we're looking for as part of a regular 360. I agree that some of these things are just not going to be things that are going to be reportable in that way, and I think it's more the absence of having any major issues in those areas is kind of the evidence that those areas were successful. I've been kind of, after reading this over, I've got some questions generally that I think if other board members have questions on how some of this, maybe something that they're thinking about, is that included, or what category is that included, or where would that fall under, and come talk to you one-on-one about, okay, these are kind of some of the things that I want to know about, how best to communicate that to you, just so you know what I'm hoping to hear as part of that report, whatever that looks like.
I would welcome that.
Yeah, so anyway, that was just my initial thought between those kind of two avenues. Let you know what I'm hoping to kind of find out about and where that fits in here, along with making sure that we engage in a 360 that focuses on these areas, because this is what we're asking you to.
And part of what I'm going to suggest and propose is prior to the board completing the evaluation, I would submit a self-evaluation to all of you. If you recall the last format that I had out there that we were using together, there was an evidence column, or here's how we were demonstrating those, and that's what I would envision. That's kind of the self-evaluation or evidence to be presented. And so if you dig that up from old board minutes and take a look at, what type of activities were we doing, and conducting tide meetings on these dates, and we're talking about some cultural stuff, and increase the signage specifically at our schools with EL programs, and just different things like that. Getting out into the community and voicing in the schools, and the number of meetings that I have outside of the district, things like that. So that's kind of how I envision this going, and if we just want to touch on everyone quarterly, whether it's brief or this really is an annual report piece, I'm open to that. But again, just helping the board to identify a process to evaluate the superintendent.
Why don't we just have this a quarterly agenda item, and maybe you could just give an update to the board, and that way we're touching this every quarter, but we're just looking at it. Okay. Maybe you can find a few highlights on here to say, here's what we've done over the last quarter.
Yep.
We don't need to make it a huge process, but that way we're at least looking at this every quarter, and that way if people have concerns or questions, they can bring it up at that time, but we just touch it a little bit every 3 months and make sure that we're still comfortable with where we stand. I think once a year is probably too far apart, and so if there are concerns, they're not going to get raised. We don't want things to miss through.
This is Member Richardson. If the board ever manages to get to strategic goals, where would the superintendent's goals support that?
So you have another set of documents in here that's tied directly to our upcoming workshop, and putting these pages together, and you can see various proposing that. So I think Gary and I had a conversation. I'm trying to tease everything out, and the part I don't compartmentalize, and I think the board could use more guidance and development, is what are board goals? We have district strategic goals. I have superintendent goals that should follow those. My administrators and buildings should have goals, and those should all be lining up. Where do board goals fit into that, given the role of the board? And I think that's where we want Kristen to help the board. Right? That was our conversation, and you talked to her again as well. Okay.
Well, I'm a pretty visual person when it comes to trying to map this stuff out in my head, and I think once we get our whether it's the buy-in or the understanding on the district goals and plan, and we have our board goals, but kind of understanding what's the Venn diagram where all this stuff crosses over and how it all, I would probably literally put a piece of paper down and just be like, this fits here, this fits here, so I understand the flow of it a bit better. So that's just what I would do for my understanding of how those things align, so I can feel really confident, okay, yeah, we're fulfilling this strategic vision by Kirk's doing this, the board's doing this, and then his people underneath them, and so you kind of understand how that ultimate goal is being supported by all the various players in this organization and their own goals. I have to do that visually, and I think that's part of the exercise. Once we get a final version of this, I'm going to go through that and look at that.
Yeah, Kristen sent Gary and I document. I don't know if you've seen it today. Got the visual.
Just before I left.
Yeah, no, I just scanned it just before I walked into the meeting, and so it is a visual that kind of lines up. It's more of a pyramid.
Perfect.
And but it doesn't have on there its board goals, and that's what that's the piece that I think lies out here. Given the role of the board, goals should only be something you directly influence or have, right? So those should be the goals that the board does. And so, in a way, you influence it because you're my boss. But anyway, so we'll see if we can help Kristen get us there.
Okay. That'd be great.
Well, I, for one, looking through our strategic goals for 2021, I'm very pleased to see that we've identified 4 areas that we feel are important. We have our objectives on there and our measures for how we're going to follow these, and really how frequently we'll be measuring them and reporting back on them. So I think this is a great framework for us to look at and say, whether we agree with everything or not, there's something here in writing that now we can sink our teeth into and say, yes, this is what we needed to see. So, and we will make sure that we talk about each of these things as we come back and do reports on these things. But this is, I think, a great starting point forward. So,
I have a question about relates a little bit to board goals. It might not be the right time, but just the idea. I know in the past we've had committees to help further some things and some work outside in between our meetings. And we've talked about the next go around with the 360 having that look a little bit different. Does it make sense, or does anybody else think it's a good idea to form a 360 evaluation committee for the board members that would be interested in doing so, kind of diving headfirst in to come up with something to present to everybody else and start to at least work on what that's going to look like? Because my fear is that we're going to blink and we're going to be at a point where we're like, oh, Fred, it's time, we need to be doing that again. That was one of our goals as a board, and we don't have the time to put into practice what I think we kind of hoped and learned from the last time we went through.
Well, I'd be curious if we can maybe glean a lot of that from, maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel and create something from scratch. Maybe we can glean something from what other districts do, so we don't necessarily have to create a committee and put in a lot of extra time if there's something out there already that we can just kind of use.
And I think a committee could even just do that action, do some research, see if there's something out there that already exists, so it doesn't have to be a long-standing thing, but just something where there's a little bit of a focus on that, so it gets put together kind of in a timely manner. Otherwise, we're going to get to the fall and be dealing with those things, and then if that's something that we want to have, happen and not be in response to a crisis, or not kind of have it function the way 360 is supposed to function.
I think administered and process, and I don't know if you guys have referred you back to the OSBA handbook on what they state about 360s. I don't know how many of you have gone back and read that, but I would ask you to do that, because 360s, when not used properly, I'm not comfortable with.
Right.
And so part of that diligence, part of that diligence, that's what I would ask you to do.
And that's what I'm trying to avoid too, is that it's something that it's at least, if we're gonna use it as a tool, I think we learn some things from the first one, but not have it be a knee-jerk reaction, so it turns into something that's what none of us want. And it's, I mean, I'm happy to just go read it myself and get more comfortable, and maybe I absolve my own idea of needing a committee to do that, but I just want somebody to kind of take point on it, so us as a board owns that process a bit more than we did before, because I think there are some lessons that we learned from the first go around.
And I think that our past 2 years' experience, like, oh, it's time.
Yeah.
We're doing.
Yeah.
And to be a little more prepared, right? To be ready and to give fair
Was the 360, this is member DeLaGrange, was the 360 survey that we just completed this year, was that in line with OSBA guidelines?
No.
Okay.
Well, years ago when I first saw the 360, I had a different interpretation of what it was for. And what I was believing was that many districts were not using a 360, didn't think it was necessary. That was where you go out into the community and get community opinions. What we were doing was we were just getting internal opinions, and we were quite happy with the results. We were satisfied. Maybe that was a mistake, but when we started talking about community, we didn't worry that much about the community because we thought we would have heard from them anyway. And so if that's true, or if it's changed, I don't know. I haven't read lately. But I think it's important that if we're doing a 360 and we see that we're in sync as a board with the community in our perception of the superintendent's prowess, we're good to go. This is what we're supposed to be doing. But if we don't think we're going to gain anything by getting the 360, which is all around the community, that's the way I looked at it, then it's probably wasting a lot of time and we can get on with more important things. So I have to go back now and read and see why this 360 has become such a, we got to know 360, you know, because to me it's the whole community. What do they think of this person?
And that's where OSBA cautions. It's the community who knows the school and knows the superintendent and the work the superintendent is involved in. It's not Joe Public. And so, I mean, again, I'm going to point you back to the OSBA resources, and there's other good resources out there that can inform you of the cautions of using one and the benefits of using one. So.
Well, honestly, I think now that we have some goals that are laid out in the district vision, I think we're all very capable to sit here and listen to how things are going. I'm not, I work in a profession where outside opinion is one thing, but really the inner workings of what's happening and why things are happening are discussed here very openly. And I trust all of us to be able to listen and make informed decisions about the work that the superintendent is doing, how the district is going based on things that we're agreeing on or saying this is the goal, this is the direction we want to go, and how are we accomplishing those things. And so I did not find the 360 very helpful last year. In fact, it was very confusing. It really, I was left unsure as to what I was even reading and where the opinions were coming from. And really for me, it's sitting here listening to how things are going in the district and things that we're making progress on that's so much more important than how a community perceives the work of something, because there's so many external factors that go on to that. So anyway, we have a vision here that's been laid out, and really that's the accountability piece for me. How are we doing with the vision that we've prescribed? And that is going to be the most impactful thing for me to make a decision on how the superintendent is doing moving forward.
Member DeLaGrange, I appreciate what we have here with the superintendent goals and with the strategic goals. I think it looks really good. I too, was dissatisfied with the 360 that we had. I think the one thing that the 360 could provide, I don't know how much value it would provide other board members, but for me, I feel like having a formal mechanism for staff and students to provide feedback would be helpful for me, just so we have another avenue of perspective aside just from what we're hearing in board meetings.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Is it staff and student perception of the superintendent or perception of their experiences with the school district and the work of the school district?
Well, I would assume most of the students don't have interactions with you.
Correct. And that's the part I missed the most.
So in that regard, they would be reviewing their interactions on the district as a whole.
So I think that's what's hard. So I get a grade based on how my patients view me, but that score is representative of the bill that they got, their experience with the front desk, had to wait for how long to get an appointment. There are so many factors that I have very little control over, and so I take all of that information with a grain of salt. That all I can do is interact with one patient one at a time, and then that's the best that I can do. And the rest of it, I work on. I can try to tell the girls at the front desk, hey, you need to be really happy, and you need to find that patient an appointment, and please don't charge them so much because everybody hates the bill that they get. But really, all of that is outside of our control, and so you just have to be careful. I mean, and I get it, and I think that there needs to be an avenue for staff to be able to say, hey, we really don't feel supported here. But I think that there are those things.
There are. It's called the TEL survey. It's administered by the Oregon Department of Ed, and then it ranks us compared to other districts around the state.
So that may be something that we want to look at to say, are staff feeling supported? The kids, at least the high school, do take those surveys, and I know that Brian Thompson, the principal, shares that with the committees there, and I've sat on those committees, and those are fascinating surveys, but they're also very difficult to interpret because the data is all over the place, because some kids have a great experience and some don't, and it's hard to kind of piece out what do you do with all of that information. So, I mean, I think that we have to, what you're saying is absolutely correct. We just have to find maybe a different avenue to find out how everybody feels about things. But that 360 was just it was tough.
Well, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but at the same time, finding if I just need to come meet with you, Kirk, so I get it right in my head on it as far as how, what our options are, what we're currently doing, and okay, this is how we're getting a full picture of the board on how the district's doing, not just you individually. And I will go read the 360 guidance provided by OSBA again. I did a while ago before we did the first one, but to kind of re-educate and remind myself what those parts are. Maybe the conclusion of that process is the 360 is not what we want as a board to be part of that evaluative process, but making sure we all understand what those mechanisms are, so we do have the avenue to get that feedback from fill in the blank, whoever you're talking about for that particular case.
So, Member Brownell, one of the things that in reviewing different contracts in the state, that many contracts have that ours does not, is to re-emphasize the board members' individual responsibility to bring to the superintendent any, I'm now paraphrasing through my own thoughts, rumors and problems and discord, along with kudos and this is what's happening is right. But our first, we are representatives of our community, and if we hear something, we need to take it to the superintendent. And if there's a problem, then it's his job to get to the bottom of it and resolve the situation, so that it doesn't have to come to the board. So that's part of our responsibility also, not to just let it fester until the annual review.
Right.
So I don't believe there's any action that's required on the goals. So any other comments then? before we move on? Okay. All right, we'll head on to 6.0, board reports and special concerns. Is this the blue card time?
No, this is
It is us time.
board.
Oh, this is us time.
This is you time.
Are there any board concerns or reports or special concerns?
I have one. I've talked to a couple other board members about this, and I know that I've gotten reports, or people have told me over in the Medford area that the farm to school program, and I don't know, we might be doing this here and I just don't know about it, but the farm to school program over there, they partner with local farms, and currently they are providing free boxes of produce to families that have kids in school. And when I heard about that, I thought it was a great program, and I was just wondering if that's something that we're doing or something that we have the ability to do, or
I'm going to turn it over to Sherry speaking, but yes, we are doing a farm to school program. Is that available from our local farmers that we use as vendors? But I'm going to let Sherry speak to our farm to school program. Sherry, are you out there?
Yes, I am here. As Kirk said, we do participate in the farm to school program during the school year. And so we get the majority of our meats and fresh fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing from our local farmers and providers. I had not heard of a program where they were providing free boxes of food to families. And so that's something that I'll have to check into. I was not aware of that.
At this time of year, everybody gets free zucchini.
Oh my gosh, so much zucchini,
Go to Stafford.
so much zucchini.
My plants aren't producing yet.
I will bring you plenty.
Drop it on my door. Mine are behind. I'll catch it at the end of the season, but yours are out.
There you go, Trey.
I wanted to bring that up in case, there's an opportunity for our families to get fresh produce.
Fort Benoi is, we get a lot of stuff. One year, I remember watching the corn shucking party out here behind the high school kitchen. It was like 10, 12 people and big totes of corn on the cob.
So this is Member Richardson. I just wanted to briefly talk about air quality for our classrooms. I know we haven't had any fires yet, but it's still early in the season. When we had our meetings last year, everybody talked about more classroom instruction, but we lose so much classroom instruction for things like high temperatures or smoke, those kinds of things. With the advent of the pandemic, now air quality has become a concern. And it occurs to me, we see our charts where the students, we lose 20 to 30% of our students somewhere in the January, February timeframe, which is clearly the same type of infection transmission deal. So as we make adjustments and fix up our facilities to adjust to air quality, we are going to be getting back instruction time, both for temperature, smoke, and just students that aren't sick because they didn't get too close to some other student who was sick at that time. So at any rate, the reason I bring it up is it looks like a little bit of a twofer for me, in that we can probably reduce our transmission spread during the flu season by improving our air quality which also benefits us for this pandemic issue, which we don't know how long that's gonna last either. So just want to put out there that I'm really in favor of fixing up the elementaries that don't have good air quality yet for that type of thing.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank Member Richardson for serving as chair this past year, and thank you for helping a relatively mostly new board fumble through their first and second year. So thank you for serving.
And I think you were the first chair I'm aware of that was cited with kudos from the OSBA for being right on top of being able to meet as a board.
At first, they didn't really like you, and then they gave you kudos.
I'm pretty sure Cliff's probably been cited.
I would also echo that sentiment. I have appreciated Gary's leadership. So, all right, if there are no other concerns or special items, we will go to our action items, 7.0. So our first action item is 7.1, Resolution 2021, authorization to participate in Josephine County's short-term investment program. Kurt, you want to fill us in on that?
Yeah, this is just an annual legal obligation you have as a board to authorize the district to participate in this program. So it's investing available funds in short-term investment under certain statutes.
At high rates of interest.
Well, you would hope. I don't think anything's at high rates right now.
2%.
Member DeLaGrange, I don't know what this is. So,
Sure. Yeah, Sherry, do you want to give a more in-depth explanation of this?
Yes, I can give a really simple explanation. The money that the county is investing is just the taxes that they collect before they turn those taxes over to us. So it's just a very short-term investment mechanism that we have to approve each year.
is there some way for us to know how that money is invested?
Yes, I can ask the county to give us a profile of who they invest with. I would imagine that it's very similar to the LGIP, which is where the bulk of our state school funding and our capital projects and PERS funding is invested in. But I can certainly get the profile for you, Brian, and bring it to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
So do we take each of these items one by one?
Typically, if they're similar, we'll lump them. Or somebody could make a motion to pass all three and then open up for discussion on any of them. Usually the discretion of the board chair or other board members on how you want to make your motion.
I think all very dissimilar, so I think I would move that we approve resolution number 2021-1 to participate in
2020-1.
2021-1.
7.1.
To participate with the treasurer of Josephine County.
On the agenda it says 2020-1, on the actual form it says 2021-1.
I second that.
Typo.
That'd be great.
I'm sure it's 2021 for this financial term.
All right, there's a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Or do we need to have a roll call vote? Roll call vote, please, Levi.
Member Wilkins?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Brownell?
Yes?
Member Richardson?
Yes.
Member Coleman?
Yes.
Member DeLaGrange?
Yes.
Member Durbin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. second action item is approval of North Middle School GMP contract amendment.
Sherry, do you want to give a brief summary of what the amendment is and the rationale behind that?
Yes. So when you enter into a CMGC process, the first step in that is selecting the CMGC, which we selected Corey Vitus. And then once the CMGC is selected, then I go through a process with the successful contractor. And in this case, ZCS is also involved, and James, and we spend a lot of time going over the scope of the project, and then the contractor has to go out and get bids for the project, and then we have to agree on this guaranteed maximum price. And so the guaranteed maximum price that you see here is what we specified in the specification documents when we went out for proposal. And then that gives a breakdown of the estimate of the cost of work, and then the CMGC fee, which the 4.93% is pretty much an industry standard for the contractor's fee. And so once we go through the whole process and we go through the scope of the work, then we determine that the contractor can meet the guaranteed maximum. And so we've gone through that whole process. It's been interesting for North, just as it was with Highland, because we have so many seismic type soils issues up there, a lot of geologic issues with the soil. So, but Corey has done a great job working on the scope. ZCS has done a great job, and James has been super involved as well. So I'm comfortable with the guaranteed maximum price, and that we'll be able to come in at that price for the seismic project.
All right, thank you.
Durbin, I move that we approve action item 7.2, approval of North Middle School GMP contract amendment.
I'll second it, but Coleman.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And is this for building B and C?
Yes.
And what amount of this money, or do we have any grants that cover this?
Yes, this is all covered by a grant, Debbie. It's the seismic grants that the state has been issuing for the last, I believe 5 years that they've been having the seismic rehabilitation program, and this is part of that. This is one of the awards that we received.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering about the amount that I was thinking that the grant award was more than this, so I just wondered.
Yeah, you're right, Debbie. The grant award is more than this. The difference between this amount and the grant award is what we pay the architects and engineers to do all of the drawings for the project, as well as there's a lot that goes into the geo studies for this one too, especially like I mentioned before for North and Highland. We spend a little bit more on those two schools for just the additional work that they had to do to make sure that they were providing the scope for dealing with the slope slippage issues that we have up on the north end of town. So the balance of that does go to other services that we have to have in order to complete the project.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Levi, will you take a roll call vote, please?
Member Wilkins?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes?
Member Brownell?
Yes?
Member Richardson?
Yes.
Member Coleman?
Yes.
Member David Green?
Yes.
Member Durbin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Lastly is approval of Gilbert Creek and Portola Park leases. I think this come up.
I apologize. I actually received some communications relating to the Gilbert Creek, which I didn't have time to act on, and so I guess I would move that we push the approval of Gilbert Creek and Berthold Park to the next meeting.
What information are you withholding, Gary?
I know. I wasn't thinking about it. One of the city councilors asked me about it. I said, well, yeah, the city said they didn't have any money or anything. And the next thing I got back was that Aaron Cubic wanted to talk to me about it. He was going to talk to me this week, but that hadn't happened and it slipped my mind. I'm happy to turn that over to the current chair.
Member De La Grange has some questions about the lease as well, because when I inquired about it originally, I was under the impression that it was going to be a 20-year lease, and now I'm seeing that it's 10. And so I'm curious about the conditions as to why that was changed.
Sherry, do you want to answer that?
Sure.
Here's the conversations with Laura.
Yes. So in talking about this with Laura Glover, part of what went into the decision on the term was previous discussions with the board about not wanting to have such a long term on the lease. And so they would be very happy with a 20-year lease, but she also said that a 10-year lease would be acceptable with them as well. And then if we do choose to sell either of the properties, we would include that first right of refusal clause in the leases. And so we did do that. It's completely up to the board, though. If you are more comfortable with a longer term on these leases, they would be very happy with as long of a term as what you would be comfortable with.
Member Wilkins, I think that the shorter term came up during the whole North Middle School 2, 3. We hashed it out more after the fact too, but I'd be curious what kind of, if there's no rush to push this to approval, to see what the proactive reach out would be, if that impacts anything, I don't know. Okay.
There's no rush. This can be moved to the August 11th agenda.
And I knew after years that we didn't have one.
It'll allow you to have a conversation with Cubic and inform the board chair.
Okay, so,
You need a motion to move that?
well, we have a motion. Gary offered a motion to table it for now.
To push it to.
I'll second it.
Okay. Levi, would you take a roll call vote on that motion, please?
Member Wilkins? Yes. Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Brownell?
Yes.
Member Richardson?
Yes.
Member Coleman?
Yes.
Member De La Grange?
Yes.
Member Durbin?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. That was easy.
I'll wait till you turn it, I don't know. Yell at me, though. Sorry.
All right, so our future meeting dates and suggested agenda times, so our next meeting will be on the 28th, but pursuant to our last motion, it will be changed to 5 o'clock.
Correct. 5 o'clock is the board workshop. I believe the board had decided at the last meeting in lieu of a meeting, we will workshop. So that's just tentative for the board meeting proper. So the board can eliminate that on consensus. And therefore we would have the 28th 5 o'clock workshop. And then 8.4 will get adjusted to 5 p.m.
All right, any concerns over eliminating the board meeting that evening?
The next update from ODE, the 21st?
The next update from ODE is the 21st.
We just, if there's anything stands out, obviously we're probably going to hear it anyway, or,
Yep.
or we
You're going to hear it, or you'll hear from me, and
Yeah.
any updates, we can give you summaries as we learn more information, new information.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, well, that concludes our regular session. We'll take 5 minutes and then enter into